Today, we're going to dive into this quiet revolution that's been happening all across the internet. It's not about stocks, it's not about politics, it's about something way more personal. We're talking about a huge grassroots movement of people who are trying to completely quit pornography. We're going to look at why it's happening, what that journey is actually like, and what they say is waiting for them on the other side of this pretty massive challenge. And just to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about here, get this. Over 500,000 people are members of just one single online community dedicated to this, the subreddit r/nofap. And that's just one forum out of many. So yeah, this isn't some tiny fringe idea. It's a really significant and growing phenomenon. The word they use for this process is rebooting. And the idea behind it is pretty straightforward, right? They're trying to reset their brain to its original factory settings, to, in their view, recover from all the negative effects they feel pornography has had on them. Okay, so that begs the big question, right? What is pushing literally hundreds of thousands of people, mostly men, to take on what is an incredibly difficult challenge? Why even try to reboot in the first place? Well, when you actually dig into the personal journals of people trying to quit, three major reasons keep popping up. The big one, by a long shot, is a perceived addiction. Almost 8 out of 10 people cite this. Then you've got real-world sexual difficulties, and after that, a whole range of negative psychological and social effects. And look, when these users talk about addiction, they're not just throwing that word around casually. Their personal stories often line up almost perfectly with the clinical definition from the American Society of Addiction Medicine. This idea of a chronic disease of the brain's reward system, one that makes a person chase a behavior over and over, even when it's causing harm. That's the exact cycle so many of them feel they're trapped in. And it all comes down to this thing in our brain called the reward system. Think of it like a little circuit with key players like the ventral tegmental area and the nucleus accumbens. Its whole job is to release a chemical called dopamine. Dopamine is what motivates us to do things that are essential for survival, like eating or having sex. It's the little voice in your brain that says, "Hey, that was good. Do it again." And some research starts to paint a picture of why they feel this way. Take this 2013 Cambridge study, for example. It found that when people who identified as compulsive users were shown explicit material, their brain's reward centers lit up in a way that was strikingly similar to how an alcoholic's brain reacts to an ad for beer. And some of the claims out there get, well, pretty alarming. For instance, one source, which was submitted to an Australian Senate inquiry, quotes a neurosurgeon, Dr. Donald Hilton. He alleges that increased viewing can lead to as much as 20% shrinkage of the frontal lobes, the part of our brain that's in charge of judgment and self-control. It's a really stark claim, and it's a huge part of the story for those who believe serious neurological changes are happening. Okay, so the second huge motivator is sexual difficulties. Nearly half the users in that journal analysis reported having issues, and the most common one, by a really wide margin, was erectile difficulties. A lot of people in the community even have a name for it: porn-induced erectile dysfunction. They're convinced their real-world performance is being directly hurt by their online habits. And it doesn't stop there. Beyond the addiction and the sexual stuff, rebooters link a whole host of other life problems to their porn use. We're talking about mental health struggles like anxiety and depression, a crippling lack of motivation or what they call brain fog, and even damaged relationships. For them, this isn't some harmless private habit. It's something they feel is dragging down their entire quality of life. So if all these problems are so severe, quitting should be a no-brainer, right? Just stop. Well, as so many people discover, the journey of abstinence is an incredibly difficult challenge all on its own. The road to recovery can be super confusing, partly because your body starts doing these weird, contradictory things. On one hand, people describe something called the chaser effect, this intense craving for more pornography right after an orgasm. But then, on the other hand, they also report the flatline, a bizarre and often disturbing loss of all sexual desire while they're trying to abstain. Imagine trying to navigate those opposing forces. It's a huge challenge. And to make things even harder, the triggers for relapse are, well, they're everywhere. The external ones are almost impossible to avoid in our world. Your social media feed, movies, TV, even just being alone in a room with your laptop. But the internal triggers are just as powerful. Any negative feeling, stress, boredom, loneliness, can become a conditioned signal in your brain to go seek relief. This quote from one user's journal just perfectly captures that internal battle. It shows how relapse is often this negotiation with what they call their addicted brain. It's a whole process of rationalization, a fight against these cunning internal arguments that make giving in feel like the only possible way to stop the psychological pain. So, with all of these immense challenges, how on earth does anyone actually succeed? Well, it's not just about gritting your teeth and having more willpower. They develop a whole toolkit of strategies and resources to help them navigate this rocky road. Maybe the single most important resource they have is each other. These online forums aren't just places to complain, they are absolutely vital support systems. The shared experience, the accountability, it transforms what feels like a lonely, isolated struggle into a collective journey. And for many, that's absolutely instrumental for success. Success also comes from some really practical, hands-on techniques. A core goal for so many is to finally break the link between masturbation and pornography. And resources like BrainBuddy offer step-by-step guides for this. They're centered on what, for some, is a radical idea: retraining the brain to use mindfulness and your own imagination as the main source of arousal, instead of needing to watch videos. And this brings us to the final, and let's be honest, the most important part of the journey. For those who actually manage to push through the struggle, what's the reward? What's the perceived payoff that makes all of this worthwhile? So, what is the ultimate prize? Well, according to countless reports, it's not just about stopping a behavior, it's something much deeper. It's about this profound sense of regaining control, that feeling of freedom from a compulsion that they felt was running their lives. And you can really see this transformation when you line up the problems that started the journey against the benefits they report at the end. It's almost a perfect mirror image. That feeling of compulsion gets replaced by a sense of control. Sexual dysfunction gives way to improved intimacy. Social anxiety is overcome with real confidence. And that brain fog they talk about is lifted, replaced by mental clarity and motivation. A story like Simon's really puts a human face on all these benefits. It shows the ripple effect. He didn't just stop a habit. He reports becoming happier, more confident, and actually better at connecting with people in his real life, all because he felt a true sense of freedom and personal growth. So in the end, regardless of the ongoing scientific debates, this rebooting movement is a really powerful, lived experience for hundreds of thousands of people. And it kind of forces us to ask a bigger question. What does this massive, self-directed effort at recovery tell us about our modern relationship with technology, our search for genuine intimacy, and maybe even our very definition of ourselves?